Hello, I'm Roberta Winters, past president of the League of Women Voters of Radnor and present president of the Delaware County Interleague organization. Today I have with me a special guest who contacted me to do a show. While we had many potential topics for our program today, I selected the issue of gun safety. As you may be aware, reducing gun violence is a hot topic, not only in our region and state, but also throughout the country. For decades, the League of Women Voters has had a position relating to gun policy, and today I will interject parts of the League's position to guide our conversation. Let me now introduce my guest, Alim Howell. Would you begin today by telling our audience a little bit about yourself, Alim?
Yes, thank you for having me, Roberta. It's good to be here with you. Originally, I'm from Lower Merion Township, Montgomery County, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and went to school in Lower Merion School District. And I do activism and advocating for a few nonprofit organizations, which are Race for Peace Committee, Urban Navigation, and sometimes volunteer with Men of Action, Brothers of Faith. And that's about it.
Well, that keeps you very busy, I'm sure. How did you happen to get interested in the issues surrounding guns?
I have seen news stories, a lot of news stories about gun violence, and it's been happening since the 2020 era began. So in the news, there's gun violence constantly, and it's happening throughout the city of Philadelphia and throughout the counties, Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks, Chester. So that's basically how the gun violence arose. And the organizations I mentioned also are doing things to participate with gun violence and try to combat it. But that's the main interest, is because it's always happening.
Well, you have shared with me pictures of yourself with many public servants and law enforcement officers, from police superintendents to elected officials. What was the general sense you have gained regarding gun safety and reducing gun violence from your discussions with them as a whole?
From the discussions with elected officials, the common sense has been guns don't kill people, people kill people. So law enforcement officers talk about having guns off their streets. And when I call and speak to local police officers that are patrolling the streets, they would just say that it's really up to the parents, especially of the youth, to get the guns out of the household. Because some of the guns, he made a little joke, which is he just said, you know, some of the guns that the youth have now, they're better than the police guns. And I didn't know how to think about that, but then that's what he said. So I just, but really, it's the parents of the youth have to get these guns out of their hands, because it's in the wrong hands. And sometimes illegal guns and even legally owned guns can be a problem too, such as something that happened this month in October. It was at the Collingdale Wawa. It was two women arguing outside of Wawa. You heard about that story? And then one woman shot the pregnant woman fatally. And so she had, the district attorney, Jack Stolzheimer, he was saying that she had the right to legally carry the firearm. And see, these guns are the main issue and the main problem. It's in the wrong hands sometimes, the illegal guns and legal guns.
Well, I'd like to share with you and our audience a bit about the gun policy adopted by the League of Women Voters. And it happened first in 1990 and was amended in 1994 and 1998. And that's more than 20 years old, our policies, but it was not a knee-jerk reaction to events of today. Some of the situations have remained the same. So the League of Women Voters of the United States believes that the proliferation of handguns and semi-automatic assault weapons in the United States is a major health and safety threat to its citizens. The League supports strong federal measures to limit the accessibility and regulate the ownership of these weapons by private citizens. The League supports regulating firearms for consumer safety. What is your reaction to this section of the position statement? It sounds similar to what you said the police officers were saying, to get the guns out of these people's hands.
Right. I agree with the League of Women Voters statement, making it harder for citizens to obtain firearms throughout the county. And then the common sense regulations would be citizens to obtain guns should be harder. So it's a controversial thing, but then especially from our elected officials, more policies have to go through legislation to make the guns harder to get in people's hands. So I agree with the statement you said.
Well, there's more to the League position, so let me continue. The League supports licensing procedures for gun ownership by private citizens to include a waiting period for background checks, personal identity verification, gun safety education, and annual license renewal. The license fee should be adequate to bear the cost of education and verification. So based on your conversation with others who have their feet on the ground in this area, do you believe the licensing procedures need to be improved? And do you think specifically what would make a difference here?
I believe that having a longer wait period for guns would work. And if guns are harder to obtain, that would be good for especially ones with criminal backgrounds. So people sometimes have a criminal background and somehow they can still get a license to own a gun because maybe it expunges, which that's good. You know, you get your criminal history, race and stuff like that. That's good. But then it's still, having a legal right to own a gun seems so easy. It's almost like almost 1 in every 10 people have a gun, or maybe 5 in every 10 people. I don't know. But then also the procedures will also ensure more educated gun owners, which will result in all around safe gun practices. So people who have guns, you know, you would hope that they wouldn't use it to attack and harm people. And that wouldn't be their mindset, to just say, I can't wait to use the gun to hurt somebody or harm somebody, or as soon as they get a little angry, right, and have high rise in tension, you know, they say, I'm gonna take out my gun now and shoot them. You know, that's not what the gun is for. Usually back in like the 2000s and the 90s and stuff, it would be a gun, you would have a gun for safety and security only, and it would be locked up inside your parents' closet or something. It wouldn't be just to have in your car every day or just on you all the time, just to, you can't wait to use it basically. And that's the vibe it is nowadays.
Well, given the complexities of the issue, the League had some further recommendations, so let me share again. The League supports a ban on Saturday night specials, enforcement of strict penalties for the improper possession and of crimes committed with handguns and assault weapons, and the allocation of resources to better regulate and monitor gun dealers. What are your feelings about banning certain types of guns?
Banning any type of gun or any certain type of gun is, to me, it's a good thing, because the more guns on the street, it's the more violence and the more crime. Anything like knives, a handgun, any type of restriction would be good, because outright, because it doesn't help. But to me, no matter how big the weapon is or how small the weapon is, it doesn't matter, because they're all used to harm somebody.
Do you believe we should have stronger enforcement of penalties for crimes committed with assault weapons and guns?
Depending on the critical circumstances, yes. So depending on how bad the crime was, how bad the critical condition someone is, like someone harmed someone with a gun or a knife or something, how bad that person, the victim, got injured. That goes to what the police department and the attorney's office would do on how they punish them. So, but if someone outright murders someone, then yeah, that's just, the penalty is going to be the penalty. But it depends on how bad the critical condition is with the weapon.
So in other words, you're saying it should be basically a case-by-case basis, depending on what's done. And did you hear others with whom you spoke speak to the need for adequate resources to regulate the sales and the monitoring of guns?
They don't speak much on the sales part of things, because selling a gun, if you have a gun ownership, a gun store, and they have all the proper paperwork and all the licenses to have their own store to sell guns, then you can't really take that away because it's legal.
Right.
But it could be stricter monitoring.
Right.
in communities at the gun stores. And sometimes it's just a toss-up because you just don't know how you can monitor it and how you can restrict it and how you can just get these guns, depending on the person. It depends on the person's mental health of what they're going to do. You just don't know nowadays, what someone's going to do. But yeah, if the police monitor it and then,
might be a better chance of keeping it out of the hands of the wrong people.
Right.
Now, since 1998, when the league positions went into effect, gun issues have really changed. We used to be concerned about lost and stolen guns. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then there were straw purchases made by other people and then given to people who shouldn't have a gun. And now we have ghost guns. And ghost guns are those unserialized and therefore untraceable firearms that are put together by components purchased either as a kit or as separate pieces. Do you have any opinion regarding these kinds of weapons?
Ghost guns are no good for the community and for mankind. When people have ghost guns, they're illegal guns that are on these streets committing the crimes and committing all these gun violence murders. Most of the crime and the murders that happen throughout the city and the counties are by ghost guns, I believe. And they're just no good. And for some reason, some of us don't know how they're getting on the streets and how people are obtaining illegal guns, because we have gun stores and they sell guns, but the illegal guns, they're hard to track.
Right. And technology has also made it possible to even use a 3D printer, not only to make your own gun, but also modify a simple gun into a machine gun. What do you think about these kinds of changes?
The 3D printed guns concern me in some way because the ghost guns are what give the people in our community the more opportunities to create the illegal firearms. So when you have a 3D gun, a 3D printed gun, that's basically like a ghost gun because you created it yourself. And with technology being so accessible to the youth who are really academically advanced could make their own gun through the 3D printer. So that's another problem. And if they're interested in computer and engineering, and then the resin of that gun is what makes it really. And that's off of the 3D printers to create a legal firearm again.
It's like a plastic gun, but it works.
Right.
Well, since we realize, as you said before, guns don't kill people, but people do, perhaps we need another option. Many believe that laws, regulation, and outright bans are not the only answer. I'm sure you heard about the red flag laws that remove guns from the hands of people who are a threat, and that's helped, but it really hasn't helped enough. Do you have any ideas that might help based on what you've heard from many local experts in the field?
Based on the politicians and the police, they host events such as buyback events. So the Philadelphia City Council also does buyback events. That's with President Keanna Johnson. Mm-hmm. And gun buyback events, people go to the certain area or location where the event is held, and they give their illegal gun or gun they have, and they buy it back from them. I thought that was a good idea, and a lot of other people can probably agree with that. You know, you sell something back and you're getting money for it, but then sometimes the older or in the neighborhoods, they would say that they would use that money to just buy more guns. And it's just like, it's a lose-lose. But then if they have some type of initiative or something, so when people sell back their guns at a buyback event where they won't spend it on getting another gun, that would be good. So then, not being too harsh and too antagonizing and stuff like that, but just trying to give them a positive vibe that, you can spend this money on something else rather than another weapon, another firearm, because that's what's killing the streets. So buyback gun events should be happening more on a monthly basis, especially nowadays when we see all the crimes committed by guns.
Well, I'd like to share with our audience a position adopted by the Pittsburgh League of Women Voters that we will be examining in our local leagues for the next few months. After study and consensus, we will then bring it to the State League of Women Voters Convention for consideration to be adopted throughout our state. We'll then be able to advocate using these perspectives. And this is what it states. The League of Women Voters of Pittsburgh specifically rejects the assertion that the Second Amendment prohibits the regulation of firearms and that gun violence should be addressed primarily as a law enforcement problem or by hardening schools, government buildings, public transportation, infrastructure, and public venues. Do you agree that just law enforcement's not enough?
Yes, law enforcement is not enough because it's unnecessary for some schools to have certain restrictions. Like say the Upper Darby School District, that was this year around September or October, they might even put it into place where they have gun detection systems. So a gun detector in the schools. So see, things are getting from bad to worse. So law enforcement is doing all they can do, but then now some schools just have to get involved with the gun violence epidemic and crisis, because if youth are going to have possessions of these guns, then somehow it has to be a way to not have them on them in the school. So it's just going from bad to worse.
And do you think regulation alone is the answer?
Yes and no, because the Second Amendment doesn't say anything about a level of regulation. Mm-hmm. It is a basic right, but the right should be earned through processes and checks. So they also have more to their opinion, and they say as an alternate approach, they endorse a public health approach to reducing gun violence. We support using research-based strategies that measure success in terms of public health and safety, and they reject the idea that more armed citizens will increase public safety. Do you think having a mental health perspective is a good idea? Yes, especially nowadays, mental health. A lot of it is through mental health. People, we're all human and all that, and we all get mad, angry, sad, happy, but certain emotions at a certain time, are you going to use a weapon to protect yourself and your family? That's a little different. Right. But then if you're just going to use a weapon just because you get mad in an argument, especially if it's one-on-one, it's not like anything, it's all bad. It's all bad, but the mental health of someone has to be checked out sometime, and we can all use that. But then, especially people who have legal guns and illegal guns, those are the ones and the people who have to really get mental health because they have that weapon on them.
Right.
So, because some, like I was saying before, the woman that had the right to carry, right, shot a pregnant woman fatally. And so,
Well, the League of Pittsburgh even went further, and they support certain restrictions on gun ownership and usage that will serve to support safe communities, the freedom of citizens to assemble and move about freely, and to enjoy their community's lifestyle without fear of being shot, and to send their communities to school and colleges without fear of their becoming a victim of gun violence. We all need to work on improving people's sense of safety and to reduce fear. Do you believe certain restrictions would help reduce our sense of fear and promote a safer world?
Yes, the more restrictions from the government and law enforcement and attorneys and stuff like that, the less crime will happen. The more restrictions, the less crime. The harder it is to get guns, there'll be less crime on the streets. The less guns people have in their hand, that's better. But people still have a right to own a gun, but it just should be less. And it should be way harder to obtain a gun. It just seems so easy nowadays. There was actually something I saw recently. This was a few weeks ago. It was a man, and it was just in passing, and he was filling out the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to legally own a firearm. Right. He was filling out the paperwork, and that was right in front of my eyes. So it's a good thing that he can get approved for a gun, but then it's just a bad thing because that's just putting more and more guns in the hands of people who may or may not need it.
Well, We all need to work to improve people's sense of safety and reduce fear. And so I'm glad you're here today to talk to me about that. And I appreciate you joining in our conversation, Alim, because the issues surrounding gun violence and safety are complex, and solutions to the problems they have created are not simple. Our police provide free gun locks in Radnor to prevent accidents with firearms, and groups like Ceasefire and Radnor Groups for Safety educate and advocate just as many members of the League of Women Voters do as they join them in their efforts. And we'd also like to thank our audience today for joining us in this program, and hope they will help become part of the solution to the ongoing challenge to our health and safety threat created by so many guns in our society. And I would, of course, be remiss if I did not thank Mainline Television Network for again providing the opportunity for us to share these ideas and help educate the public on important topics such as this. If you'd like to become part of the League and discussions about this advocacy on gun issues, please join us. And thank you again. Bye now.